Hello, and welcome to the Romancing in Paris podcast. I'm your host, Lily Heisey. In this podcast, we'll be traveling around the city as I pick out my top romantic spots per arrondissement. You don't have to visit these places only as a couple. Exploring them can be the expression of your own love of Paris. Are you ready to get romancing in Paris? After visiting the posh 8th district in our last episode, we drift a little to the northeast and hop over the arrondissement border into the 9th. The 9th. Extending north from the Opera District and Les Grands Boulevards up to the Pigalle area, until a decade ago, no one really talked about this formerly middle-class district. Then the high end of the neighborhood started to become hip and took on the nickname Soapy or South Pigalle. But the neighborhood wasn't always family-oriented and tranquil. The ambiance was much different in the 1800s, a century when the neighborhood transitioned from being the hub of the Romantic era to the land of nighttime and naughty pleasures of La Belle Époque. Oh la la! Today's episode is a tiny bit risqué, but also delightfully delectable and perfect for an original date night in Paris. Grab your chérie. We're going to La Maison Souquet. Once outside the city walls of Paris, a swath of the 9th district was developed in the 1820s, a neighborhood which became known as La Nouvelle Athènes, or New Athens, in reference to the Greek influences which inspired the architects who populated the area's streets with stylish townhouses and apartment buildings. The area soon attracted the artists, composers, writers, and intellectuals of the Romantic era, a literary and artistic movement that was born in the late 18th century as a rejection of the formality and rigidity of the official neoclassical style. We touched on this in the episode on the 7th arrondissement, when we met the artist Eugène Delacroix. Well, the painter actually lived in La Nouvelle Athènes before moving across the Seine to the Rue Furstenberg. He was in good company over here in New Athens, surrounded by the likes of fellow romantic artist Théodore Géricault and writers Victor Hugo and Alexandre Dumas, among many others. The home of the Dutch painter Henri Schaeffer became a meeting point for their circle. This has since been transformed into the Museum of Romantic Life. It's well worth visiting, and some might wonder why I didn't focus on it for this episode. The museum is already rather well known, so I thought I would highlight some of the more hidden attributes of the neighborhood instead. The museum has displays focused on Nouvelle Athènes residents George Sand and Frédéric Chopin, whose relationship makes for fascinating romantic fodder. Perhaps we'll touch on this in another episode. Sand and Chopin weren't the only lovers who lived in the area. In fact, one could also find lorettes, young kept women nicknamed after l'Église Notre-Dame de Lorette, the parish church of this new neighborhood. It is neoclassical in style and looks like a Greek temple. Those Lorette girls were hardly saintly, and might have been in the cult of Eros or Aphrodite instead. Along with Les Lorettes, more prestigious courtesans also moved into some of the sumptuous private mansions of the area. These could also be great topics for future episodes. In addition to these, other carnal establishments set up shop in the area. Maison close, or brothels, began shifting here from their former concentration around the Palais Royal, which we discussed in the first episode of the podcast. As evening entertainment in all its forms pushed further north into the streets south of Place Pigalle, the area also filled with cafes, dance halls, and cabarets. This nighttime frenzy reached its climax during the Belle Époque, the beautiful era, which lasted from the early 1870s until the outbreak of World War I in 1914, a period which saw the arrival of the Moulin Rouge, the Red Windmill, the Red Light District. Indeed, red wasn't chosen haphazardly as the representative color of these naughty districts. Red lanterns were used to indicate the location of the Maison Close. While this form of advertising isn't really used anymore, 2 red lanterns shine outside the entrance of 10 Rue de Bruxelles, a tiny side street which descends from Place Pigalle and steps from the Moulin Rouge. This is the location of La Maison Souquet. Don't worry, I'm not recommending you visit a bordello. However, this was what existed 100 years ago within the building of La Maison Souquet, now a stylish boutique hotel which houses a superbly seductive bar. As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, it was around 10 years ago that South Pigalle neighborhood started shedding some of its former seediness. This began with the transformation of some of the area's escort girl bars into cool cocktail bars. What was so successful about these was that they often kept a little hint to the area's racy past, especially those around Rue Fauchet, which we'll talk about a little later. La Maison Souquet is part of this reinvention. From 1905 to 1907, the building was a house of pleasure run by a certain Madame Souquet. After it closed down, the building shifted to being used as a regular hotel. In 2015, it was transformed yet again, this time into a chic 5-star hotel. Star interior designer Jacques Garcia, known for his work on the glamorous Hotel Coste, was hired to recreate a lavish boudoir of the Belle Époque. To do this, he used decorative objects from the end of the 19th century, like alluring antiques and sensual paintings. This sumptuous decor is found in the hotel's 20 rooms, but also in its plush hotel bar, which is open to the public. Shall we pop in to have a look?
We'll be right back with Romancing in Paris after a word from our sponsors. And now back to Romancing in Paris.
Once we spot those flickering red lanterns, we know we are in the right spot. Inside, we are first met with an elaborate arabesque decor. With gilded arches and columns, it seems like we've stepped into a sultan's harem or a chapter of 1001 Nights. The Moorish feel carries through into a sitting area, which opens onto a cozy library, the main section of the bar. Here we have more of a Second Empire look, akin to the Napoleon III apartments at the Louvre. Lighting here is lower, and the ambiance is oh so inviting, with deep burgundy velour chairs, wooden paneling, and provocative paintings. The final room, the Winter Garden, overlooks a small interior courtyard with a delicate goddess-like statue. Aphrodite, perhaps? It is brighter thanks to large windows, an abundance of mirrors, drapery, and floral cushions. This is perhaps best suited for a late afternoon drink. Speaking of drinks, the venue and the neighborhood's seductive roots are also echoed on the bar's menu. On it you'll find carefully concocted cocktails named after famous courtesans and cabaret performers. There are also créations gourmandes, a hybrid between a cocktail and a dessert, which use ingredients like vodka-infused strawberries, white chocolate liqueur, and lime whipped cream. The ultimate decadent pleasure, which might precede others? The Maison Souquet's bar is a wonderful place to fire up an original date night in the 9th. Albeit a tad pricey, the setting is unrivaled, and as it's rarely very busy, it's even more ideal for romancing. Afterwards, you could walk the short distance over to Rue Frochet to discover some of the trendy former hostess bars, which each have reminders of their past. Lulu White Drinking Club is a sultry New Orleans Prohibition-style joint which still has its glass ceiling. Dirty Dick, a fun tiki bar, has kept its original name. Across the street at Lipstick, the decor has plenty of nods to its sexy past. And yes, that really is a dancing pole. Oh la la! Lipstick also has a great happy hour until 10 p.m., which can make up for the expensive first cocktail you might have had at La Maison Souquet. The area is also plentiful in great modern dining establishments where you can carry on your romantic evening in Soapy. Thank you for listening to this latest edition of Romancing in Paris. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. That way you won't miss the next one. Ratings or reviews are also received with plenty of amour. Curious to learn more about this era and area? I lead a tour called The Sexy Side of Pigalle, which finishes with a cocktail at one of these bars. And why not La Maison Souquet? See my website, jetaimeneither.com, for more details, where you can also find my romantic guide to the 9th and other articles on Paris and beyond. This podcast was produced by Paris Underground Radio. Check out their website if you are interested in listening to more great podcasts on Paris, including my other podcast, Paris Cachet, which explores even more lesser-known and hidden places in the city. Until next time, happy romancing in Paris.